Well, welcome to the 700 Club. No fear of the United States. That's what Iran is flaunting as it boasts it can strike Israel anywhere it wants. The Islamic regime even published a map of the Jewish state with a list of specific targets.
Israel is preparing to take on Iran alone. They're not counting on the United States' support after the administration's disastrous pullout from Afghanistan and its desperation for a nuclear deal with Iran. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
When Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz met with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin recently, he reportedly presented a timeline for an attack on Iran's nuclear program, telling Lloyd Israel is preparing for the Iranian challenge at the operational level. In an article called Just One Wrong Move, the state-affiliated Tehran Times boasted that Iran can hit Israel anywhere. To drive home the point, the story included a map showing selected targets. In this equation, a big question sticks out. How do these foes view the U.S.?
I think the picture is clear that the Iranians see that the United States they don't have to fear the United States, and they're continuing to escalate their program. And in return for the escalation, all they get is more and more concessions to the administration.
National security expert Michael McCoskey has recently talked with a number of Israeli military leaders.
They feel they're alone. They know they're alone. They see a U.S. that is withdrawing from the region, retreating, afraid of confrontation, desperate for a deal, not able to instill fear in the Iranians. And they feel the responsibility is going to be on them, the Israeli military, to prevent a nuclear Iran.
McCoskey says these Israeli military leaders perceive a growing weakness. They cite the Afghan pullout, U.S. reluctance to stand up against Iranian provocations, and an eagerness to enter into a flawed nuclear deal. In the meantime, the IDF needs the U.S. to speed up help in the form of military tools to take on Iran, like KC-46 air tank refuelers.
That's not the only thing Israel needs, by the way. They also need precision-guided munitions. They need more F-35s, F-15Is, some helicopters, things like that. I would not only accelerate delivery to Israel this, I would make a show of it. It would be a signal to the Iranians.
While the Pentagon is moving slowly in that help, Israelis seem prepared for what might be coming. According to a recent poll, over half of Israelis would favor a military strike against Iran, even without U.S. help.
If I was the Prime Minister, I wouldn't wait for the United States. I would take some definitive action now. I don't know if I would bomb right away, but I think as an option B, I think that's probably what I would do. If somebody walks up to you and says, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill your whole family, would you wait for that to happen, or would you take some definitive action to prevent it?
Due to the situation in Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. Now, we don't care that India have nuclear weapons or Afghanistan, but Iran is a different thing. It's ideology of destroying the Jewish country. And the last time somebody had this ideology, he killed almost all of the Jewish people.
I don't think the IDF leadership harbors any illusions that the United States will take care of this problem. I do believe when it comes down to it, they're going to have no choice. I think the U.S. policy has been only to bring us closer to war. I believe the chances are more likely than not that the Israelis will do something militarily to prevent a nuclear Iran. I just think they know they cannot live with a nuclear Iran. The question is what is their red line?
Whatever that red line might be, it appears to be getting closer. Gordon?
Chris, tell us about this red line. Well, what is the red line for Israel?
Well, exactly what there's, Gordon, they're not saying right now. Naftali Bennett, for example, back in October, he spoke to the General Assembly. He said Iran had already crossed those red lines, but he didn't say exactly what they were. But it's pretty obvious one of them would probably be when Iran enriches uranium to weapons grade. That would be 90%. Right now, they're at 60%, and that really is very easy to go from 60 to 90. So then that might be just weeks away if they choose to go that far. But in addition to that, Gordon, to get the enriched uranium, you also have to construct a warhead. Then you have to put it on a ballistic missile. That could take more time, could be up to a year or more. But the question remains, Gordon, what will they do? When will they do it? And will they have to go it alone? As we just reported, it looks like that may be the case.
I've got to ask, how will Israel know with certainty that it's gone from 60, that it even is at 60%, or will it be at 90%? How will they know with certainty that Iran's achieved it?
It's a good question, and right now it's probably uncertain if they will know. And the reason for that is that the IAEA actually, Iran has put some of them out. They brought some of them back in. They have some of the cameras in some of those sensitive nuclear facilities. But what Iran is saying right now, they're not going to give the video. So it's uncertain when they will know, but I assume they have ways they're going to try to determine whether they've gone that next step.
Well, let's talk about military capacity. Israel seemed to have the capacity to take out Iraq's nuclear reactor. It took out Syria's nuclear reactor, stopped those nuclear ambitions. Will it have the capacity to do it?
That's a great question. You know, in 1981, they took out Iraq's reactor. Then in 2007, they took out Syria's reactor. But the difference with Iran is they're trying to get enriched uranium through centrifuges. And so right now they have literally dozens of nuclear facilities. The question is, can Israel hit them all? Now, some former Israeli military leaders say it'll take literally 2 years to get ready, and that Israel isn't ready now. And they say current planes that Israel has can't carry the latest bunker-busting bombs, and they need those to destroy those underground sites. And the key right now, for example, Gordon, is there's not enough air refuelers. Israel has ordered 8 of those KC-46s we mentioned in our report, but they won't be delivered till 2024. Now, others are more optimistic. They say Israel could destroy a couple of the key nuclear sites. That would be Natanz and Fordo. But if Israel does strike those sites, then we're going to see a new Middle East, Gordon, because then Iran will probably try to strike Israel directly and unleash Hezbollah missiles from the north.
Well, let's talk about Muslim end-time theology. The Ayatollahs believe in the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. What does that have to do with nuclear weapons? What does that have to do with war?
Well, a lot of people may not know this, but Shiite Muslims, many of them believe the 12th Imam, they call him the Mahdi. He's a messianic figure who will come back at the end of time, and he will bring peace and justice. He disappeared in the 9th century, they say, but he's going to return during a time of world upheaval. And some Shiites, like President Ahmadinejad, the former president, they believe you can hasten the return of the Mahdi by doing 2 things: destroying the great Satan, the U.S., and the little Satan, Israel. So when you mix this end times theology with nuclear technology, it's a toxic brew with global implications.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks for the insight. You can always get that insight and more by downloading the CBN News app. You can follow Chris's reporting from Jerusalem on Jerusalem Dateline. In other news, the Omicron variant is now the dominant strain in the U.S. Mark Martin has more on that and other top stories from the CBN newsroom. Mark?
Gordon, Omicron has spread to almost every state as millions of Americans are traveling over the Christmas holiday. The White House is rolling out a new strategy to combat the surge. This as President Biden had a close call with the virus. CBN's Jenna Browder has more from Washington.
As President Biden prepares to roll out his latest strategy, a COVID scare for the commander-in-chief himself after he was exposed to a staff member who tested positive. The White House says Biden tested negative Sunday and Monday and will be tested again tomorrow. This as COVID cases spread like wildfire across the country, driven by the new highly transmissible Omicron variant. Omicron now accounting for 73% of new COVID cases in the U.S., and in some parts, 90%.
This Omicron variant is stunningly transmissible. It is really ripping through the United States at an incredible rate.
And now the first reported Omicron death, a man in his 50s in Harris County, Texas. A city official saying he had an underlying health condition and was unvaccinated.
It's really achieved in about 3 weeks what it took Delta 3 months to accomplish.
With effective vaccines and boosters, Omicron symptoms do appear to be less severe. And encouraging news from vaccine makers. Moderna says its booster increases antibody levels against Omicron 37-fold, Pfizer 25-fold. But many Americans still doubt the vaccine. Even fans of former President Trump booed him when he admitted to getting a booster shot.
Did you get the booster? Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so...
Don't.
In a speech today, President Biden is expected to encourage all Americans to get vaccinated. He'll also lay out his administration's latest strategy. 1,000 military medical personnel will be deployed to help overrun hospitals. FEMA will set up hospital overflow sites to distribute supplies, creating new federal testing and vaccination sites starting in New York City. And the president will announce free home rapid tests for any American who requests one. The problem may be getting those tests in time for Christmas. Yesterday, I stopped by 5 pharmacies in the area and no home COVID tests to be found. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
In other news, an amazing revelation today about those missionaries held captive in Haiti for 2 months. The 12 hostages gained their freedom by escaping from their captors and walking for hours through difficult terrain before finding help. Christian Aid Ministries releasing details of the daring overnight escape, beginning with a pre-recorded video of the missionary team singing a song of praise for their deliverance.
Angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them.
A ministry spokesman said the hostages sensed God nudging them to make an escape, but waited patiently for confirmation and sought him for the right timing. On the night of December 15th, they believed it was time to go.
When they sensed the timing was right, they found a way to open the door that was closed and blocked, filed silently to the path that they have chosen to follow, and quickly left the place that they were held, despite the fact that numerous guards were close by. In the distance, they could see a mountain feature that they had recognized and they had identified in the previous days. They identified this landmark before, and they knew that this is the direction that they needed to go. They also followed the sure guidance of the stars as they journeyed through the night, traveling toward safety.
The group included a 10-month-old baby, a 3-year-old child, 2 young teens, and 8 adults. They walked for hours through woods, thickets, and brambles, at times stopping to ask God for direction. When the sun came up, they met someone who helped them make a phone call for help and returned to the ministry guest house.
And as we reported yesterday, the missionaries are offering forgiveness to their captors and pray they will come to know the Lord. And Gordon, I'll tell you what, that story is harrowing indeed, but a wonderful example of faith and strength and resembles many stories in the Bible.
Well, you think of Peter, and here's Peter in jail, and an angel appears to him. And the shackles fall off and the doors open, and he walks to the place where they're actually praying for his release, and they don't believe it happened. You know, you couldn't have seen Peter. He's still in jail. It's amazing. When the first reports came out, a lot of speculation that the ransom had been paid, and here to finally find out the real story, well, God delivered them. He made a way where there seemed to be no way, and they literally walked to their freedom. What an incredible miracle and an incredible answer to prayer.